What is going on, YouTube? It's Tyler from Mission VR, where it's my mission to bring you guys good quality VR content. So in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at some of the best and worst game genres for VR gaming. Now, obviously, this list is subject to my opinion, and there are definitely going to be some exceptions on this list, as, you know, maybe a game that falls into a category that, you know, the game was amazing, but the category itself may just not be that strong for VR. So with that being said, make sure you guys keep that in mind, and please do let me know in the comments section you know, what games that, you know, maybe in the worst or best category that you guys really enjoyed playing, and you know, it really changed the landscape of VR for you. Also, please do drop a like on this video and subscribe to my channel. I'm bringing a ton of VR content, and I like to keep doing it for you guys, so make sure you go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe, and let's go ahead and hop on into this video. Okay guys, so first up, we're going to start with kind of the worst genres for VR gaming, and if I did miss a genre, please do let me know. I also kind of stuck to genres that were kind of more larger genres. Obviously, games are tagged with many different genres, and a lot of them pull from a mixture of those, but I kind of just stuck to a general broad genre, you know, a style of game that may not necessarily work that great in VR. And the first one we're going to kind of talk about is sports, and I wouldn't necessarily say that sports games are bad in VR, because there's actually a couple that I've played that are pretty solid. In particular, 2MD VR Football, I think is a really, really good game, but that's really the only sports game that I've played that I've been impressed by. Every other sports game that I've played has been really gimmicky. You know, the controls are terrible. It's just overall just not a great experience, and I think the sports games in general in this entire genre is just lacking. And it's surprising to me, because there's so many people that year in and year out buy FIFA games, buy Madden, buy NHL games. And, you know, we just, you know, with the Oculus Quest 2 success now, and, you know, with VR growing, I'm definitely expecting to see some better sports games coming down the pipeline here, and hopefully we do get to see that, because I think it's a genre that's definitely missed out on. Alright, so next up we have 4X games, and if you're not familiar with what 4X games are, they're kind of grand strategy games. That stands for Explore, Expand, Exploit, and Exterminate. Games like Stellaris, Civilization, these type of games, we just don't have any in VR, and I'm not necessarily even sure it would work, but, you know, knowing that strategy games kind of do work well in VR, I think that this is a category that could build a pretty solid VR game if somebody put enough time into it. Now, the problem is with 4X games in general, they have a niche marketplace, and VR is already niche in this current day and age, so for a developer to develop a true 4X game takes a lot of time, and to then port it over into VR, yeah, that's going to be kind of challenging, and you may not get any return on your investment there. So the best option honestly would be for some existing 4X developers to just port their game over to VR to allow us to play in VR. But again, not really sure how that would work, if it would work at all, but this is kind of a game category that we, you know, may or may not ever see VR games in. So next up with our VR genres that are not so hot, and I know this one might be a little bit controversial, because there are actually some games out there that are solid in VR in this era, and this is side scrollers. This is kind of more of a opinion, personal preference. I've just never really been a side scroller fan, even on, you know, playing on regular screen. Just never really been a side scroller person, and then you know, I just feel like it's a lack of a game in VR. Like when I'm playing VR, I want to be present in the moment. I want to be the character, and sometimes, you know, side scrollers just, I don't know, they just, for me, they just don't get it done. But again, it's a personal preference, and I think that it's kind of a lack of VR technology usage. But there are some really solid games like Kin, Squishies, Astrobot. I guess I could call that a side scroller, even though it's a little bit more of a platformer, but overall, these games are pretty solid, and people really do enjoy them, but I just think this is a category that, you know, personally, a personal preference, not a big fan of. Okay, so and lastly, with our worst VR genre category here, now this is a genre that you can make an argument to me on, but I'm just going to be honest, I just don't think that these games are meant for VR, and that is third-person games in general. Yes, I know there are a couple out there that are pretty solid, Hellblade, Edge of Nowhere. I just really don't like third-person VR games. I get sick with the camera, and I'm a person who never gets motion sickness. I mean, I could play the most extreme flight sims in VR. I never get motion sick, but the way the camera whips around in some of these third-person games, and I just overall, I don't like it. I would rather be, controlling a group of characters from above, like I'm playing, on a tabletop or something like that. But like in third person, you're kind of in the world, but you're not in the world. And overall, I just think that this is a terrible category for VR games. And, again, there are some, of course, outliers, but, there's not a ton of third person games for a reason, because VR really wasn't meant for third person. It was pretty much meant for first person. And overall, I think we see that going on in the industry. I definitely want to hear your guys' thoughts on that, what you guys think of third person games, if you've even played any. I know there's not a ton out there, but I know personal preference for myself, I am not a big fan of third person VR games. Okay, so now we're going to be moving on to the best genre, and this list is kind of hard because there are some really good genres for VR. Honestly, most genres you pop a VR game into, it's going to be a pretty solid experience, unless the game is just absolute garbage, because VR it puts you in the world. So it just is so hard. If the game is good, even if it's a game category that you don't play a lot, if the game is a solid game, you're going to feel incredible playing it in VR. So this was really difficult to kind of pick, but I do have kind of some of my favorites compared to some of my nots. And the first one we are really going to start with here is platformers in general. Now, I've never been a big platformers type of player. Something I haven't played a lot of in my life, but I've been relatively impressed with VR platformers just because it's just so different being able to actually do this stuff in VR. And more so, I would say, I know that Moss and, Astrobot, those games are considered platformers, but I'm talking more like along the lines of first-person platformers, stuff like Stride, To the Top, The Climb. These games are incredible, and they really do put you in the atmosphere of, moving your character from one place to the next, and, using it in a dynamic way where you're climbing, you're jumping, you're, crossing massive ravines, just different things like this. I think it really is well done in VR, and overall, a pretty good, solid experience. Again, not my favorite, but I do enjoy some platformers in VR. One of the other categories that I have never been a huge fan of, just on its own, is puzzle games. I've never really played a ton of puzzle games, but I have played a couple in VR, and the ones that I have played in VR have been really, really good. It's the difference between me sitting there and just thinking about, where I'm going to do this or how I'm going to solve this puzzle, compared to actually being in the game world and having to do things like Eye of the Temple is a great example of this. This was one of the best VR experiences I've ever had, where, you have to think actually like you were there, and, use your lasso, and, the way you use your lasso matters, and, everything you do, the levers you pull, it just has such a feeling of presence in the game world that it really gives you that extra little kick. And when you combine, two categories like RPGs and puzzle games, wow, it really gets kind of crazy when you're in an RPG and you have to solve a puzzle in real life, basically. So another category that, is pretty good in VR, which is, again, another little bit of a surprise. Now, I am a little bit of a junkie for this genre, but strategy games. Now, I love strategy games outside of VR. It's pretty much the only screen games I play anymore, strategy games, just because, there isn't a ton of VR strategy games, but the ones that are out there are pretty decent. I mean, I know Brass Tactics comes to mind, but the one that I'm really, really like is Battle Group VR, which is, kind of you're at the bridge of a starship and you are commanding a fleet in real-time strategy. Really, really amazing game. I've just sunk so many hours into it, just the feeling of being at the bridge of a starship and outmaneuvering another enemy fleet. It is really amazing, and I've played a lot of strategy games in my life, and I'm really looking forward to the future of VR strategy games, because I think there definitely offers a different perspective. When you're commanding a bunch of units in VR, it just, for whatever reason, there is that sense of battlefield presence. In a game like Battle Group, you're still kind of in first person doing it, which I think was a really unique take. A game like Brass Tactics, you're looking down on a table, but it is still a lot of fun, and you still do get that sense of presence, almost like you're a little kid playing with toys again. Strategy games are actually pretty solid in VR. So our next category here is obviously, this is kind of one that VR was built for, and that is sim games. So whether it's a sim game like Elite Dangerous or DCS World, War Thunder, a racing sim, you kind of name it. If you're at the cockpit, it was basically built for VR, in the future, and that's really what we're seeing. And some of the sim games are just fantastic in virtual reality. The sense of presence you get sitting in the cockpit of a fighter jet or a spaceship, or sitting in the driver's seat of a racing car, is really incredible in VR. And honestly, I think these are some of the experiences that, will change people's minds about VR whenever they've never played VR and they sit down for the first time and, they take off their spaceship, or they launch off of an aircraft carrier in a jet, or, they cut a hard turn in a racing game. these are the things that really do change people's opinions on VR. And sim games were like built basically for VR, and they are honestly fantastic in virtual reality. There's just some really good ones out there. I mean, I can't tell you how many hours I've put into Elite Dangerous. It's just phenomenal, and it gives you that sense of escaping when I really do feel immersed playing those type of games, and that's kind of what the overall goal of VR is to really just get lost in the world. So our next good category here, and we're getting down to the wire here with some of the best categories, and this one is kind of a little bit, I'll say, controversial, only because there's really no solid titles out for it, but it's definitely going to be one of the best categories for virtual reality, and that is social slash MMO games. Now, yes, you could argue social games, obviously, like Rec Room, these type of games, yes, they're incredibly popular. VR chat's incredibly popular, and some of the best experiences people have in VR, and that's kind of like, you're escaping to a different world. So when I say social games, yes, I can rule those in. These are some of the best, absolutely. But MMO games, we don't really have any yet. I mean, we have one, Orbis, and it's okay. It's a good game, but it doesn't really have a lot of detail. And it's definitely missing some things in the back end. Now, this summer, we are going to be getting Zenith, The Last City, which by far and large looks like it's going to be the real deal when it comes to VR MMORPGs, which is amazing. This is the lacking category that we have not had, and I think that the social experience that's going to be had in this game is going to be second to none. And on top of that, they're going to have the MMORPG mechanics that we all know and love if you're a fan of that genre. So I think this is going to be an absolutely fantastic game, and it's going to end up turning out to be one of the best genres for VR once we get some more support for it. Okay, so our next category here is going to be story-driven games, and this is really where VR starts to shine. Story-driven games are fantastic if it's a well-written story in virtual reality. The feeling of actually being there as a character in the story is fantastic. It is unbelievable when you get really lost into a story. A game like Lone Echo is just a great example. When it just suddenly everything else doesn't matter, and you are the character playing in this game. And a game that maybe didn't have the greatest story, but a game that I really actually found myself lost in was Medal of Honor. Just a fantastic game. You feel like you're part of the war in this game. You feel like you were really just in this environment. You forget about everything else going on around you. You're just working towards the goal of completing the mission, continuing the story. You start to, the characters, things that happen to the characters, you actually get involved in it because you've kind of been there almost in real life. It's really amazing. I really want to see more story-driven games out of VR. There just isn't enough yet, and the ones that are there, they're just too short, and I want more. I definitely want more story-driven experiences in VR because they are some of the best titles in particular story-driven RPGs. Oh, we are really, really wanting more of that. At least I am. I really love story-driven games, especially in VR. I always was a big multiplayer game fan, but story-driven games in VR are something unbelievable. Okay, really, is it any surprise that at this point, we haven't talked about shooters? Clearly, and I'm sure everybody that's watching this video was expecting shooters to be in the best categories list just because it's shooters. And VR was almost built for shooters, just like it was built for Sims. Shooter games, that's no surprise that there are the most shooter games, currently on the market. If you're looking at all the indie titles, all the big games, a good handful of them are shooter games, and for good reason. The shooter games aren't that hard to figure out when it comes to VR, and easy to balance, and they're just overall really fun. And you may only spend several hours in a game. Like Zero Caliber is a great example of this. It has a single player story line. There's a lot of different guns in it. It's overall a pretty solid game. I think I spent like 8 or 9 hours in the game total so far, but it's one of those games I keep coming back to just because it's a good game. And then there's so many other shooter games like Half-Life Alyx, Onward, Contractors, Population 1. The list just keeps going and going. There's a lot of good shooter games out there, and it's really a category that's pretty safe for VR, and it's overall just, again, a fantastic category. Okay, guys, so you're going to find out what my favorite VR genre category is, and that is role-playing games. Let's face it, I've said it so far, Sims and shooters were kind of built for virtual reality, but not like role-playing games. Role-playing games, what's the whole point of a role-playing game? Is to play a role of a character. Well, where better to do that than in virtual reality, where you actually become the character? This is the category of games that is unbelievable to me, and of course this is my opinion. I'm a big role-playing game fan. I've always been a big role-playing game fan, so when you put it into virtual reality, these are some of the best experiences that I've personally had. I'm actually currently playing through Carnage Chronicles, which is an older VR title, but I'm really enjoying it. But some of the best experiences, I mean, honestly, Skyrim in VR is really fantastic. I mean, it's Skyrim in VR. I mean, if you haven't played Skyrim at this point, you're missing out. It's a really, really good game. It's just fantastic. Some of these role-playing games in virtual reality where you actually, upgrade your character, you level yourself up, you're putting on different armor sets, you're getting different weapons. It just feels so right to be in virtual reality to do it, and I'm really looking forward to some of the upcoming role-playing games that are coming out that just look, really fantastic. And some of these actually are shooters to some extent as well. They pull from both categories. I know After the Fall is going to be kind of a role-playing game, with some multiplayer elements in a live, game world. I'm really looking forward to that game. I think it's going to be really, really good. And on top of that, you have other games, like I said already, Skyrim, Carnage Chronicles, Witching Tower. There's just a lot of, indie RPG titles that really are good and you can sink some hours into. And I'm really looking forward to like Zenith. That's going to be a massive multiplayer online role-playing game. There's a lot to be there with role-playing games, and I definitely think it's probably the best category for virtual reality games. I'm sure your guys' opinion is going to differ from that, and I definitely want to hear what your favorite VR game category is in the comments section below. But guys, that is going to be it for this video. Make sure you do drop a like on it and subscribe to my channel. On top of that, like I said, please do comment in the comment section what your least favorite VR game category is or what your favorite VR game category is. I'd love to hear from you guys, and I really do look forward to that, and I really do try to reply to all the comments. So make sure you guys do that, and I will see you guys in the next one.